Welcome to this week's program. We're going to be looking at the very delicate subject of mental health. Now, sadly, many people sweep mental health as a subject under the carpet. We can't afford to do that. There are a lot of people, once again, very, very sadly, who should listen and should be heard. So what we've done is we've done a couple of programs and we'd like to show you, for example, my story. Depression, yes, it does hit both genders, and yes, it will hit all age groups, but it seems that women have got their own area of concern. Basically, they take a lot onto their own shoulders, and being the sort of the family glue, for the want of a better term, invariably they won't show it to anybody. So what we've done is we've gone to some experts to find out what specifically we can talk about as far as women and depression.
I've got my own unique view on what depression is, and I'll let you know, but to set the stage, let's talk about physically for a minute. Physically, you don't go to the doctors every time something's wrong, because your body's pretty good at healing itself. But occasionally it can't, so you go to the doctors and get a bit of extra help. But imagine if you'd never been to the doctors your whole life. Imagine what state you'd be in physically. Like, I don't even know if I'd still be alive, but if I was, it would not be a pretty sight. Now, that's a state some people are in emotionally, because it's the same with emotions. A lot of emotions, we can process them, resolve them, come out the other end on our own. You know, some take a bit longer than others, like grief, but we're pretty good at getting over them ourselves. But occasionally we can't. Do we have the culture of taking you to see someone to help with your emotions? No, we don't. So they stay with you, and they stay with you. And every year you live, not only are these emotions staying with you, but you're kind of adding more every year, and it builds up to become this overwhelming burden. One of my clients described it as like a backpack full of rocks that she'd been carrying around with her. And she said, I didn't even know I had it until you took it off me, which is pretty cool. But I think that's a really good analogy. I love that one. Like, to me, depression is like, some people call it, like a black overcoat. But to me, it's like a backpack full of rocks.
It's quite an important tool to be able to do, is just to listen to people. And then, of course, if they have mental health problems or depressions, then we need to decide, do we refer them to a counsellor? Do they just need to talk to someone who is not a friend or a family member? Sometimes they just need to talk. It's interesting, sometimes just by talking with people and talking through their problems can give them some help as to how they sort out their problems. If someone is obviously very depressed, then of course we need to decide whether we refer them for counselling immediately, or do they require some medications. And sometimes the medications might be just to help them sleep and switch off their brains so that they can cope a bit better. Or we sometimes immediately will put them on to an antidepressant. So there are a lot of options.
So what are the symptoms?
How do you know the difference between being unhappy and being depressed? And I think unhappiness doesn't make your life worse, but depression does, if that makes any sense at all. Let me explain. For instance, one of the things that we can do when we're depressed is we look for ways to distract ourselves from those thoughts and feelings we don't want to have. And that can be very destructive, because we'll look to things like alcohol. Why do so many people come home on a Friday night or go out on a Friday night and have a few drinks? Because it works fantastically. It blocks out all those thoughts and feelings about work that we don't want to have, and it keeps them away. Not saying you should do that, I'm just saying it works. So do drugs. So does smoking. Smoking is well known to dampen down uncomfortable feelings and alleviate stress. But the problem is it's temporary. And as its effects wear off, much like alcohol, you have to re-tranquilise yourself with something else. But there's other things that we can do, like, for instance, we might overshop, spending every time we go out shopping. I get a real sense of joy when I buy something that I really like. And so that can be like some person's equivalent of drinking or smoking. Gambling, of course, or there's the whole overworking or keeping busy. That's where you get gym junkies or people that just never relax and they're always doing something. One of the reasons why we're always busy, and we all know people like this, is because we don't give ourselves time to think or feel. So that can be a symptom that we've got something more than just a generalised unhappiness when we're actually doing something that is harming us or the people around us in some way.
Those who are suffering from it will invariably hide it.
Some women, of course, will hide it. There is the pride aspect for many people, that they don't want to be seen to be weak or not coping. Many people don't, are great at putting on a good coping face and are good at hiding the way things really are going. It's only really people close to them who will recognise, well, there's something not quite right, and that's usually, of course, a partner or a close family member.
We do hide it. There's a culture, as you know, Rob, of, if I say to you, how are you today? You're going to say, good, thanks. And there's a culture of, if I say that I'm not good, what will they think? And so we hide it and we put on the brave face, and especially if we're an outgoing, sort of bubbly type of personality, we tend to think that's what people like about me. I've got to give them that. If I'm not that person, they're not going to like me at all. So I have to keep being that person. And so we put on our mask and we build our energy up when we're out. And that actually makes us feel even worse. That actually makes our depression worse when we're playing that role, because it's using up the little energy that we have. One of the things about depression is that it does sap our energy. And so we have to, you know how you've got a money budget and you have to spend your money wisely? Well, we've got an energy budget as well. And we have to spend our energy wisely. And when you are unhappy or depressed, you've got a lot less energy. So spending it on playing the role that you think people want you to play is not a wise use of it.
And we don't talk about it.
And that's partly due to the culture, that we feel this pressure to be this happy person that we think everyone wants us to be, and that they won't like us or think that we're a failure if we're not. So the culture comes into it. And the second reason we don't often talk about it is talking often doesn't help. Here's an interesting fact, and some people may disagree with this, but this is a fact that I've read somewhere. Research shows that the average amount of time someone goes to therapy for is 10 years. Well, something's not working. Perhaps this is an American figure, but something's not working if you're going to therapy for 10 years. And often just talking about our problems doesn't change them. And so, you know a wee bit about me and what I do, Rob. And and I'm not a counsellor. I don't have people come to me and just talk, because I don't see a lot of value in that. They can do that, but I like to actually change the reasons why they're feeling the way they're feeling. And I use a form of energy psychology known as EFT. And I'll just quote Dr. Bruce Lipton for a moment, who's an amazing man. And he says, and this is no offence to any counsellors, because there's some wonderful ones out there who are very holistic, but some of them are working just with the mind. And of course, we're not just a mind, are we? I mean, we're mind, body and spirit. And so he says, this is a quote from Dr. Bruce Lipton, he says, the problem with counselling is you go along and you talk about things, and you come to some realisations, and you think, now I understand myself. I am the way I am because this happened to me or this didn't happen to me. Now I understand myself. I can change, you say to yourself. And he says, no, you can't, because a lot of your behaviour, thoughts, emotions, behaviours are programs running in the subconscious mind. And he says the subconscious mind is like a tape player. It can only play the program it's got. You can talk to a tape for as long as you like and ask it to change, and it can't. It can only play what's loaded onto it. And he says the subconscious mind is like that. So just realising and saying to yourself, I can change, will not work. And he says EFT, which of course is the form of energy psychology I use, he says EFT is the equivalent of pressing the record button and recording over it. So that's why I use this form of energy psychology. But you're right that just talking often doesn't work, and so people don't go. And we're talking about culture again. I mean, if we talk about people like the police, they see some terrible things, some quite traumatic things. And they have quite a culture, so I'm told, that they don't go and talk about it, because they've got the culture of let's just be tough and we'll go and have a beer and, we'll just forget about it. And I think a lot of rural people have, because, it can be a bit of a tough life, a lot of rural people have that, like, let's just be strong. No, we won't talk about it. There's other people going through this. They seem to be coping. They seem to be coping. He seems to be coping. Perhaps I better cope as well.
And of course, by not talking about it, that can lead to a suicide situation that nobody saw coming.
Yes, because they've been wearing their mask when they're around other people. This mask that I'm doing well, I'm happy, perhaps the extrovert mask. And yet inside they've been getting worse and worse and worse because that's been sapping their energy and making them feel more depressed, because the more they play that role, the more they realise that they can't keep playing it. And the more they feel like a failure and a fake. Fake is a word I hear a lot. A lot of people say to me, I feel like a real fake. And that's not a way to live your life. We've got to be authentic. And so people don't see it coming, partly because people are hiding it and wearing the mask, partly because people are using, I call them tranquilizers, things like alcohol, shopping, eating. Oh, we forgot to mention the eating one before. Overeating or comfort eating is a way also, much like alcohol and smoking is, of distracting us from thoughts and feelings we don't want to have. Works wonderfully. The funny thing is, you don't eat that bit of chocolate cake and then feel better about yourself. You actually feel worse. But you're feeling worse about something completely different to what you're feeling bad about before. So it actually still works.
So therefore the subject really is, talk to somebody. Just find somebody who you think will understand.
Well, if as a human being you are feeling really low on mood and you're feeling hopeless and miserable and it's persisting and it's not just transitory, then you do need to have the courage to ask for assistance, because there is plenty of assistance available if only you ask and you know who to ask assistance from. So the first thing, as I would say, would be to have the courage or have the strength to, I would say, go and see your doctor. And tell your doctor that you're feeling, how you're feeling.
Often, depression can be put down to the fact that we are putting too much emphasis on ourselves and the risk of failure.
If I asked everyone in the room what their idea of success was, everyone would have a different answer. And there can be problems that arise when someone's version of success means this and I can't get there. So if I can't get there, I have failed, I'm a loser, I'm not good enough, are all thoughts that we have about ourselves. So you will not be happy if your version of success is too high and too unachievable. And we get those from all sorts of places, from our parents, from culture as well. And one of the things I do with my clients is help them to change their definition of success so that they don't feel that they're failing. And the other interesting thing is that a lot of research has shown that happiness has nothing, well, not nothing, happiness has only 10% to do with your life circumstances. So if you're doing really, really well, you're achieving, you're financially well off, everything's going great, perhaps you're in a great relationship, that accounts for 10% of your happiness. 90% has nothing to do with what is or isn't happening in your life. 90% is to do with your mindset, and that's how to be happy is actually a learned skill. It's just the problem is that most people haven't learned it. And if your parents didn't know how to be happy, how can they possibly teach you? I didn't learn how to be happy till I was in my 30s, so it was a bit late in life.
Sharon, as a young woman, went through some very serious cancer. Let's hear her story and what got her through her depression.
When I was only 32, I was given just a few months to live with cancer. I was in a lot of pain. I was very sick, couldn't breathe without coughing. I was hospitalised just about full time, and I had my 3 children at home waiting for me and wondering if Mum had come home at any stage soon. And things did get so tough at times that I actually didn't want to go on. The pain was just so bad. I thought it's got to stop, but I knew I had these 3 little girls at home and I had to go home to them. They just pull you through the other side and keep me going when I would have given up otherwise. It's the physical is, how can I go on in this physical state? Will I get to go on? They've told me I can't. They've said there's no way you can live through this. Just to be as comfortable as possible, get your affairs in order, and ring us when you need to get away from home. But then they decided to give me some treatment that may make me a little more comfortable, And it did. It worked miracles. And I did get better eventually. But, in that dark time in hospital for a whole year, I'd only get home for a couple of days at a time, and then I'd be rushed back because something would go wrong. The balances would get out, my blood pressure would drop or something like that. I'd get dehydrated and get rushed back to hospital. And there was no certainty in life, there was nothing to say, I will get home. And the thing that I had to hang on to was being a mum. And when I was home, even though I was bedridden, there was times when, the kids would come bounding into my room to ask something, and I'd, wrap them up in my blankets, and my mum would come in and say, "Now, don't disturb your mum, she's not well, you come away and let mum sleep." But really, it was all I had to hang on to. I wanted to still be a mum, and I didn't feel anything could take that away. I was a mum. And it just, I fought for those kids tooth and nail because I wasn't leaving them behind. Who knows what would have happened to them? All the thoughts that go through your head, what will happen if you're not there, they all went through mine, and I did. I thought at those times when I felt I couldn't go on, that was what pulled me through.
And her husband wasn't spared either.
My husband's a lovely, lovely man and an extremely successful farmer. He makes me proud every day. But he started getting grumpy, and nobody knew why. There'd been a family issue that I thought had triggered this grumpiness, but I thought, it'll go away when he sort of gets over the hurt. And he got grumpier and grumpier, and weeks stretched into months, and months turned into years. And, he lost his joy for life. He wasn't, when the grandkids bounded in, he didn't enjoy them leaping on him anymore. He'd sort of go, "Oh, don't we get any time to ourselves?" And he'd always loved them being there. It was, his absolute pleasure time. And eventually we realised that maybe he were a little depressed for whatever reason, but in him it came out as grumpy. Just lost his joy and happiness. And we worked our way through that idea that was possible, and once it was recognised and we could move forward, he came back, and he's a lovely man again. And he's back to the man I married 30-something years ago.
So where do we look for help?
That's important to understand, that many people hide their depression because they don't equate a depression as they would with any other illness, such as having high blood pressure or diabetes or angina. They think it's just something that I can pull my socks up and I need to be stronger and tougher and I'll get over it. When in fact your central nervous system and the bag of chemicals and neurotransmitters is quite complex and can be determining your mood and your outlook on life and how you're interacting with other human beings. So then there's something wrong, and there is assistance available. All I would say from a GP's perspective is I would like to be seen as to being accessible. You come and ask for an appointment and we will see you. And so access is important. You need to be able to access someone to help you. You need to feel welcomed and not judged. Don't judge people because, it's always, you could be me. I could be you. That's what I always think. And I could be you easily. So how would I feel if I were you? I would really like to be able to come to someone who made me feel like you're not alone. And we've all got these problems. And so we don't pretend that none of us are immune from it. And then you just want someone to help you, don't you? So what's the help going to be? Maybe some medications, maybe just listening in a conversation, or maybe referring to someone who is quite independent of your friends and family and social surrounds. And maybe that's all that's required.
There are people in the rural districts who are there to help.
Well, I believe you should talk to anybody you can. I think you need to be brave enough to say I think something might not be right. But for farmers, these rural support trusts are very helpful, and they can take you right to the right people. Your GP is there to help you. Sometimes you have to be a little bit more forceful and actually say, you know, I really think I may be a little depressed or something. Otherwise it might not be recognised as that. And Rural Women, we are a great networking team, and we just love standing by each other. And we also have places that, you know, things we can tap into to help. So there's many places, there's, you know, Lifeline, lots of support places. But even if it's to talk to a friend and say, you know, I think I'm feeling a bit down in the dumps.
She's really talking about that feeling of just being flat.
And sometimes it is just flat, or, you know, you just drop something and you think, oh, when you should have just gone, oh, I dropped that. You know, things affect you that maybe don't need to. The little things start worrying you instead of the big things that used to before. And I think, you know, I believe we all go there at some stage to some degree, but it is recognising it and knowing that you can share it and other people can help you.
Now, the good thing is that there is protection out there. You can actually buy some insurance which is going to get you through when you are in trouble.
Yes, mental health. Mental health covers things like stress, anxiety and depression. It's interesting that that's not an ACC event. So for ACC, to be covered under ACC, that has to be an accident, and mental health is not an accident, it's an illness. So that doesn't come under their categories. So really important that people have a contract that's based around illness and injury. And being self-employed, one of your biggest risks is mental health. So a lot of pressures on people that have got their own business. Obviously it's stressful, they can be, you know, get anxious about their business and get depressed. All of those things go hand in hand. So for a self-employed person, it's really important that they've got some good covers in place that will protect them at those moments. Statistics from the companies show that for disability covers, about 17% of their claims are based around mental health. So that's quite a high proportion of claims down to that area. And not just female based, there is a lot of men as well, so where people might think that that's something that's more based around a female, that's not the case, it's really widespread.
So I do trust that that has helped. Just remember that you do not need to hide it, because there's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's the old story, if you hurt your leg, you get it treated. If you hurt your heart, or there's a problem with your heart, you get that treated. If there's something wrong with your head, it's not a stigma. It's just that it's something that needs to be fixed. There are a lot of people in your corner. All you've got to do is to recognise it and then take whatever action you feel comfortable with.
Not sure how to brighten up your backyard? Try Grow Sure Easy Flowers, all in one mix. Seed, feed, mulch. It's bloomin' easy. Be sure with Grow Sure from Kiwi Care.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Not sure why your camellias aren't cooperating? Try Growshaw Planting Magic, packed full of nutrients in just one handful. Be sure with Growshaw from Kiwi Care.
Now, while that was really focused on women, let's recap on more of a general look at depression and hope that you can find something in there that can help somebody that you love. Greetings, I'm Rob Cope-Williams, and I'm talking to you at the moment because I want to put a face on depression and the will to end it all because it is too much to face. I also want to introduce you to some people who can describe how to recognise it, how to get on top of it, and how you can recover and become somebody who is leading a normal life again. It may not be you yourself, it could be somebody who's in your immediate family or somebody whom you are close to. But I can assure you that the first thing you've got to do is, like being an alcoholic, is you've got to understand in yourself that you've got a problem before you can start healing yourself. Here's my story. 15th of October 2014. I'm driving down St John's Road in Christchurch. There's a very strong southerly wind and the trees, the big tall pine trees, are bending. And I put out to the universe a plea. I said, please can one of those trees blow over, land on my car and take me out. I hadn't wanted to commit suicide. I'd thought about it, I'd planned it, but I didn't want my family to have the stigma of their father or grandfather having committed suicide. But what I did, and what I realised I had been doing, was I was putting it out to the universe saying, please, a tree land on my roof of my car and take me out, because that's an accident. Or a truck come through an intersection, a red light, take me out. An accident, I could handle. Suicide, no. But what I hadn't realised is how deeply I was in trouble. So, what is depression? And how do we recognise it?
Well, the physical symptoms are a corollary to some extent of chronic stress. So the person will show up with gut trouble, they'll show up with poor appetite, they'll show up with low libido, they'll show up with poor sleep, and then as it physically shows up in the body as pain, it is what shows up with chronic use of musculature. So they'll have tight upper shoulders, they'll have base of the skull here, the suboccipital muscles will often be tight, and quite commonly they'll have an intermittent low back pain that comes and goes. In fact, all these symptoms will come and go depending on their emotional state to some extent and the stresses that are on them.
Depression, as we've heard, is a collection of symptoms. Occasionally it can start very abruptly. Like occasionally hear a story of a person saying, I woke up one morning and I was completely different to the day before. But by far the most common story is that people will be struggling over weeks, months, sometimes even years with some symptoms until they get bad enough that they realise something is definitely wrong now. So quite commonly it does start with difficulty sleeping, not enjoying. People can carry on their normal activities, they can go on the farm, do all their normal things, but their wife's saying, why don't you come out tonight? No, I can't be bothered going out tonight. And it's often dropping off of all the extra events in life rather than your core work, which people are often remarkably successful at continuing to do. But they'll also be finding it's harder to get up to go to work. The motivation's not there, they're not enjoying it in the way that they were, and this can take as I said, weeks or months before it gets to the point of them really realising that something's definitely not right.
The thing that brings someone into our practice, or to go and see a GP, or to seek some help in general, is some way down the line from when things actually started to happen. And part of what I would want to do with someone is kind of track that back, because the issues may have started years ago. What you may have been seeing might just actually be part of what happened earlier on in someone's life. Without knowing what it is that they're trying to deal with, they're just going to try and cope with this in the best way that they possibly can. And what we often find is that when people are trying to cope with something, they're using the strategies, but they stop working for them. And that's when they start to get into distress. The stress that they're experiencing is kind of outweighing how they're able to cope with this, and then they're going to start feeling it. What often happens then is that because we're feeling distress, we're going to try and find whatever ways that we can to reduce that distress. In my practice, it's more, and I'm sure this reflects other psychologists and counsellors as well, it's more often the case that people are coming in wanting help to try and feel better rather than think better. So they're wanting to seek help about how they feel.
So, obviously, as far as my story is concerned, I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. People were trying to work out why I was so busy that I wasn't answering my phone, why I wasn't ringing them back. Even close friends and associates who would suggest that I would go to a meeting with them, or that I would go to the hotel and have a quiet beer and a chat. There was always a reason or an excuse for me not to do it. In my heart, I was pleading for somebody to say, Rob, I think you should go to the doctor. Now, I've told you that I did go to the doctor, and what I didn't tell you was that when I did make that decision, a huge load came off my shoulders. The realization, in fact, that when he went through the list of 11 points which indicate depression, I had 9 of them. And he said any 3 is an alarm bell, which is very, very bad. So why don't we want to talk about it?
I think there's a number of reasons, and then this is just my clinical experience. This is what I've noticed over the years. There's a number of reasons people don't talk about it. One of the most common one is they don't recognise it. They don't actually realise that that's what's happening with them, because it has quite an insidious onset often. It's a build-up generated by the situation the person's in over a chronic period of time. And the other side of it is cultural. And that cultural is different for men and for women, but the cultural component is, you know, we're the tough rugby racing beer country. You know, our ideal man, the one we've been brought up as the bloke whose ideal is the Anzac, you know, this tough bloke who holds it inside and just gets on with it, and that sort of thing. So it's seen as a bit of a taboo sometimes to talk about it. But I would say that cultural grip is loosening, and people are a lot happier to talk about it than they were, say, when I first came into practice 30 years ago.
Stigma around mental health is large. There's a lot of work that's been done to try and reduce that, and a lot of campaigns to try and reduce that. But there's 2 sides to it. There's not only the public aspect of stigma around mental health issues, or a whole range of issues in life, including, say, sexuality, but there's a self-stigma, which often comes in, that if I say something about this, then I'm going to be perceived in a negative way. You know, I don't like how I feel if this is happening to me. I'm the guy or girl or woman or whoever who copes with this stuff. And if I'm not coping, then there's something wrong with me.
Well, I think all mental illness, there's been some stigma. People can perceive it as a weakness. You know, I'm a strong person, I can cope with stresses, I can cope with difficulties. But if it was just a response to stress, we probably wouldn't call it a medical condition. Sometimes it does happen in response to stress, but quite often it can happen for inadequate reasons. Now, that may partly because it runs in families, and a whole variety of other factors can contribute to who develops depression and who doesn't develop depression. But I think it is that sense that I'm strong, I should be able to cope with everything myself, and a reluctance, I think, to seek help for something which can be vague at one level. Although usually people, I know something's wrong, I just don't know what it is that's wrong.
I think at first people don't recognise it. They just sort of meet this resistance, like, I don't want to talk about this, but they may not know exactly what it is. To be able to turn around and say, I'm experiencing some self-stigma around my mental health issues is actually something that's quite a high-level thing to do. You know, you have to be aware of what's going on. When someone's really struggling with something and they're in the middle of it, you could liken it to being like a tug of war, that they've got their hands on the rope fighting this thing, and that's where all of their energy and their focus is invested. It's not in taking a broader perspective or awareness of what's going on in their life. So that makes it very hard to see aspects of, say, self-stigma at play around at that point. We're just trying to do the best we can to almost stay alive in that situation.
So, with my life story, as far as depression is concerned, I've got to the stage where, yeah, I recognised it and I'm getting some treatment and I'm getting some help. The interesting thing is that I'm now talking about it very openly. And I'm absolutely astounded how many people will say, yeah, I've been there, I've been in that dark area, I came through it because I went and got some help. So basically, how realistic is it as a number? Is it huge?
Depression is a reasonably common disorder. Over a lifetime, the estimates are at least 20, 30, possibly even 40% of people may have a time of depression at some stage in their life. It's not very common in children, but it becomes much more common during adolescence. Probably at any time in the population, 3, 4, 5% of people will be currently suffering from depression. Some evidence that Christchurch post-earthquakes, it's a little bit higher than 5%. And then there will be people clearly who have had depression, varying degrees of recovery from depression, because so often depression is a long-term condition rather than something just happens to you and you get over it. Often it takes quite a period of time to make a full recovery.
Now, therapy is something which I always ignored or walked away from and said that I certainly wasn't going to go to any counsellor. I would scoff when the news would say that counselling was being administered to people who had been through some sort of a trauma. When I went to my doctor, he told me in no uncertain terms that if I was going to heal myself, I had to be realistic and to go to a counsellor. I did, and I can recommend that you, or anyone you know, takes it on the chin, depending, it doesn't matter what their views were, they need to learn to retrain or reprogram their mind, because that is what counsellors do. Basically, you are starting to heal yourself because no one else can heal you apart from you. They can assist you, but they can't do it for you.
I think it's important for people to really be open to looking for some help when it comes to dealing with problems. No matter what kind of sphere of life you look at, people are willing to put up their hand to accept help with something that they don't know enough about to be able to fix themselves, whether it's a plumbing issue or an electrical issue or a problem with their car, whether that's seeking some help on farm management or pasture management. We're kind of, in some spheres of life, we're happy to say, hey, I need some help with this. When it comes to emotional or mental health, we're really reluctant to do that. And that does come back to the stigma aspect. But if we looked at it in a way that says, here's just another aspect of my life that I'm going to get some expert help with, then we're going to be more open to doing that. One of the things that really stops people from seeking help is the idea that they should know how to fix it themselves. I can fix every other damn thing in my life, why can't I fix this? And actually, the irony of that is it's sometimes those attempts to fix what's going on inside them as if it was a practical problem actually makes it worse. And that's where myself and my colleagues and other professionals come in to try and help someone to change how they're going about trying to fix it. You know, the skills are good, it's just unfortunately one of those situations where it just backfires.
I think the first thing on recognising in yourself or a family member or a working colleague is to go along and see your general practitioner is the best step one. And I think even identifying it, getting a name for it, understanding what it is, can be helpful and may be sufficient for a few people. There's two main options for straightforward depression. One of the antidepressant drugs. The most commonly used in our community would probably be fluoxetine and citalopram, or one of the psychotherapies. And for first attempt at treatment, there may not be much in it, but some people will have a much stronger preference for one, or maybe a bias. I don't want to take drugs, or bias against counsellors, and I think you can often go with that in the first instance for mild to moderate depression and try something. 30, 40, 50% of the time, the first treatments that's tried will work. But if that doesn't work, there's still a range of other options that continue to try. And I think that's where the GP is vital with coordinating. Is this person really improving to the extent that we would expect?
I joke with my clients often and say, well, hey, you know, when they come and see me and they're sitting on the couch in front of me, I say, well, you know, I'm the last door on the right. You know, I'm the bit that the person that someone comes to when they've tried everything else. Unfortunately, the situation also means that once someone does get to be sitting in front of somebody else talking about their problems, it's almost saying that, hey, unfortunately what you've been doing hasn't been working. But that's not to say that the person's been working extraordinarily hard to try and sort out their situation, fix themselves, do whatever they can to get themselves out of this mess. It's just that now it's time to get some help for that. And it's hard to put your hand up. Coming into therapy, counselling, is launching into the unknown. There's uncertainty in there, and we're going to be very careful around that. In fact, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. You know, who is this person? What are we going to talk about? If I'm feeling bad now, am I going to be feeling worse once I start to, you know, discuss the stuff and open up? Most people's experience, though, is that the old adage of a problem shared is a problem halved actually is true. And as soon as we start to put our hand up to having an issue, to openly discussing what's going on, then there is that phenomena of other people coming along and saying, hey, I've been through that as well. My story is similar to you. When people do that in a very, very public way, it kind of draws people out who are attracted to that, who want to be able to share their experience, and that can be the start of that person getting some help for what's going on as well.
I think it's also important because quite often people come in and the doctor says, are you feeling better? And they say, yeah, I'm feeling much better, thank you. That's the beginning of the conversation, not the end of the conversation, because people say, I'm feeling better than when I was really bad. Actually, I'm not feeling better, right? I'm just feeling better than when I was at my worst. And if you don't carry on the conversation, so I think it's often useful to ask, so if you put yourself on 1 to 10 and 10's your old normal self, where would you be? Oh, I'm only 3 out of 10, but I'm much better than I was, and I'm grateful for being better than I was. But I think that's an indication the treatments are only working in part, and one may need to rethink if it's an antidepressant, the dose, or should you change antidepressant, or have you had the right sort of therapy? Should it be a combination? And there's a series of options which are available for people over time.
Depression to me is very much like a drought. It sneaks up on you, and even though the green grass may look as though it's looking great, it's very, very short, and there's nothing there for your stock to eat. Let me put it this way. During the major earthquake in February, I lost 16 of my workmates, and I went through obvious huge amounts of grief. I came out the other side, I thought. It had been very, very hard. I was sobbing a lot, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I didn't want to know anybody. But I sort of got through it, I thought. But I hadn't. The interesting thing was that I was kidding myself that I was okay. I was turning a blind eye to the fact that I would walk out of my studio, for example, climb into my car, burst into tears and drive aimlessly around Christchurch because I felt absolutely useless. I felt as though I was worthless. I was just going through the motions of life. And that was why I wanted a tree to land on my car or a truck to take me out.
It certainly can sneak up, and again, whereas some people, maybe a third, the first treatment we try works really well, and inside the month people say, I'm so much better, I'm nearly back to my old self. But probably for 2/3, there's some ongoing symptoms, you've got to refine the treatment, you've got to think again as to how do we really get this person back to their old self, rather than just accept being better than bad.
Absolutely, it seems to sneak up on us. If we go back to what I said before around often the issues start a long time before it becomes a problem. As we start to struggle, we're going to start using whatever ways we can to deal with this, to cope with this. That can often mean, the social withdrawal, pulling back on things, and when we pull back on things, we often pull back on really important aspects of life. Human beings are social animals, and that's where we seek out contact generally as a first port of call to get some safety and some comfort in our life. So when you think, I don't want to face this stuff, I don't want to deal with it, they're going to see that there's something wrong with me, that my little secret is going to get revealed, and I don't want that. What tends to happen is we start to kind of wind up our coping strategies, do more of the things that aren't working for us in an attempt to try and sort out our situations. And that makes sense, because no one's going to say, hey, I'm really struggling right now, I'm going to just put down the things that really have worked for me in other times in my life and pick up this stuff over here. We'll just take what has worked for us and try to do more of it. More social withdrawal, more drinking, more sleeping longer than is needed, getting busy into other things, trying to occupy ourselves, eating unhealthily. These are the things that sort of start to show up in people's lives when we start to struggle with things.
Nutrition is important because we are made up of components of vitamins and minerals and fats and proteins, and often when you're depressed you don't have an appetite to eat, so it's equally very, very important to try and, whilst you might not have an appetite, just try and eat some good food, because food is important for creating and the byproduct or the starting products of your neurotransmitters. And whilst depression can't be diagnosed through a blood test, we can do some blood tests that can recognise if there are vitamin D issues, are there zinc issues, are there magnesium issues, are there B vitamin issues. So I'd firstly be looking at getting a diet that's just a basic way of eating. We've become quite complicated with how we eat with processed foods. If you look at what's in a processed food, it's incredibly complicated. There's a lot of chemicals in there. You want to get back to basics, like how your grandmother ate, with good protein sources, good fat sources, vegetables, salads and fruits, just to get a good rounded balance of those basic macro and micronutrients in.
If the lifestyle's not working, absolutely. But it's based on the context. At times in our life, whatever lifestyle we have it works fine. But when we change situations in our life, if we increase the stress and pressures in our life, how we've been living may stop working, and at that point we do need to look at what we can do differently. If we've been working really long hours or we've been under a lot of pressure, there needs to be some aspects of like focusing on making sure we get enough sleep so that we don't get fatigued, because that can often be the thing that will start to push our tolerances and our ability to deal with what life is throwing at us over the edge. It's more about, I think, maintaining good lifestyle habits, and the sort of big four that I focus on with people are diet, sleep, exercise, and doing things that are meaningful and having meaningful interactions in one's life. And if we all did that, then we're all probably going to be better off for it.
We need a holiday because it takes you out of that fight-flight response. It allows your body to go back into a more relaxed state, and that means that the pressure's not on the systems that are now under strain, and therefore the body can recover. It has an innate capacity to heal itself, providing the pressures aren't on it. And every once in a while, a bit of pharmacological assistance helps, in the form of medications. And sometimes if a person can't take a holiday or can't take a break or can't change the situation, that's the only way to hold things together. I guess from our perspective in the natural healing game, we would argue the best thing is to try and change the triggers. And a holiday is part of that process. It's getting out there and it's also reconnecting with family and friends and the things you like to do, and taking you away from the things that are actually tipping you up.
So, as far as I'm concerned, there's several points that I'd like to really stress now. Firstly, you're going to hide it from everybody. Secondly, you aren't going to talk about it. You're going to go within yourself. And thirdly, you can really only heal yourself, but first you've got to admit that you're in trouble. I did all three. I hid it. I didn't talk about it, but I did go and get some help, and I can assure you that life is very, very worth going and getting that help. And now, finally, a quick word from John Dawson from New Zealand Wool Services, who made all this possible.
We're very pleased to be able to do a very small thing to enable a greater awareness of depression. Personally, I think depression's very misunderstood in today's life, and if we can do something to help people understand it more, that's great. So I just hope that you enjoy the program and take a lot from it. Thank you very much.
And that's my story, and I'm very proud to be able to share it with you. One of the bottom lines is, actually, we need to be happy, and we've got to teach ourselves to be happy. Karen, our own happiness, apparently, according to your book, it's all in our own hands.
Well, it is. Research has found that only 10% of our happiness has anything to do with our life circumstances. So that means that we've got control over 90% of it, if we know how. The thing is, Rob, a lot of people don't know how, because the happiness is actually a learned skill. And if your parents didn't know how to be happy, how could they possibly teach you?
That's an interesting angle, because I guess we do learn from our surroundings.
We do. I mean, how to be happy is a skill I didn't even learn till my 30s. So I was a bit late in life, really, because my parents didn't know how. And luckily, as you know, I'm in the business of helping people to be happier, healthier and more successful. And so a lot of the things that I've learned over the years, because there's no magic wand, there's no one thing that'll make you happy, unfortunately. But there are a lot of different things that if you do or don't do, you'll be happier. It's the same with success. So many books have been written about success. There are certain things that successful people do. And the idea is you emulate them and you too will be successful. Same with happiness. There are certain things happy people do and don't do.
And it goes the same thing for health and well-being?
Absolutely. There's a common denominator between your happiness, your health and your success. And the common denominator is your thoughts, your beliefs and your emotions. If you change those, you can change everything.
Now, I want to get into a bit, because a lot of people think this is sort of smoke and mirror stuff. And if you told me, for example, that I could get over my vertigo, you would laugh at me, wouldn't you? You just did.
Yes, well, I'm in the know on that one.
Because, I mean, you did actually get rid
Yes.
of my vertigo.
In 1 hour?
It was an hour.
Yes. And you'd had it for how many years?
67.
Right. And the reason that I could be so successful with what I'm doing is a form of energy psychology I use called EFT. Stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And energy psychology, just so listeners understand, is a term given to anything that uses both psychology, we all know what that is, and energy medicine in the same treatment, like working with the body's electrical energy system. And because just talking about something doesn't change it. But when we actually use a therapy that will actually change things down at the subconscious level, then we can really get changes.
Because for 67 years I had been telling myself that I shouldn't be standing on tiptoes.
And did that work?
Well, it did actually. It meant that I wouldn't climb onto a chair and change a light bulb.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's an absolute fear, but that's one-way traffic going into my head.
And people just saying, well, get over it. That didn't work, right? Whereas this form of energy psychology I use, known as EFT, really works to change those subconscious programming, because you're afraid of something and like it's the body's alarm systems going off and going, danger, danger, when really there's no danger. So we've got to find a way of turning that alarm signal off.
And I had to be able to be ready for that?
Yes, I have one rule with my clients. I will not accept someone who's been sent. If you send a child or a partner and go, I need you to go and see Karen, I'm not interested, because you have to have the buy-in to want to work on yourself. Working on ourselves is actually the hardest job of all, and you've got to be ready.
Yeah. In your book, you're actually talking all the way through about happiness, and you were saying that happy people can say no, for example.
That's something that is a skill, a part of the skill that we learn to be happy. A lot of people, I find, in fact, I'd say probably about 80% of my clients have two personality traits: inability to say no and inability to put themselves first. The nicest people have the biggest problems because they're not living their own lives. So learning to say no is a vital element of happiness.
So we as New Zealanders do not normally lift our heads up because of tall poppy.
Yeah, we think that we've got to play small. And happy people, they don't have to squash themselves down and play small. They're happy to be who they are regardless of what others might think. And that's a big deal. Most of us have belief systems that we have to please someone else or not rock the boat. And so I help people to change their belief system so they can be truly themselves, because it's only when we're truly ourselves that we can be truly happy.
But you're fighting that instinct of New Zealanders to say, oh no, he's full of himself, he's whatever he might be, because he's holding himself erect.
Our whole culture is around pulling people down. It needs to change.
Where do we get a book?
My website, setfree.co.nz. I'll post one out to you. And the ebook is available on Amazon and also my website. And within the next couple of months, the hard copy will be on Amazon for those overseas. But right now, off my website.
Because it's a very good read. I mean, it basically turned me around.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Thank you for sharing that.
No, seriously, it really is. So you're based in Christchurch?
Yes, I am. And but I see people all over the world via Skype. So distance is no barrier. It's amazing the places that I work with people from.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank you very, very much indeed for watching those two programs. If we have been able to help one person and saved one person from doing something which is fatal, we have achieved what we set out to do.